access it. And then this was Jennifer's one job, was to remind me to record, and she forgot her one job. So anyway, I don't know if it's recording or not.
Yes, it's recording.
Okay, great. So if people on your team were not able to access the meeting at this time, please keep each other accountable and make sure your whole team is involved in being able to access this information, watching the video. I am going to send the PowerPoint. It's a slides presentation. I'll send the slides presentation. I'll share it with everyone after we're finished. And I think there'll probably be some discussion. So just viewing the slide presentation alone, I don't think will give everybody all the information they want. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and take a look at our agenda first. And on our agenda, we are going to be talking about compliance. We will talk about CLPs, ESY, Brightsped, and then I'm getting questions about materials, equipment, and supplies, who's responsible for what, and when can we start ordering, and all of that kind of thing. So we'll talk a little bit about that at the end. And then there's also an opportunity for a committee that you might want to join, and we'll talk about that at the very end as well. So let's get started with compliance.
Everybody's favorite topic.
Yes.
Yay!
So don't worry, the process has not changed for you, but how it is happening on our end is changing. We had Jennifer McLaughlin, who was our compliance clerk. Her last day with us was December 18th. And so because of this, we posted the position, but it really takes a certain expertise for somebody to be able to do compliance. You really have to know SPED law. You have to have an eye for detail. A lot goes into it. So we have not found a candidate to replace Jennifer. And so for the remainder of this year, we are going to be doing our compliance checks differently. So the responsibility for this will now shift to Allison, Jennifer, and I. So that being said, understand how many IEPs there are and how many of you there are. We're splitting it between the three of us on top of our regular duties. Okay, so this is a lot that's being added to us. So the only minor changes you will see is that we're going to ask you to do some things before coming to us with questions about compliance. So Mary will still be the first person to check incoming paperwork. We're going to have Lori be sending you some email reminders on things. She's going to check to make sure IEPs have been started, and if they haven't and it's getting close to that date, she's going to be sending you a reminder. Just trying to get some checks and balances going where we're spreading the wealth. So we really need to have your cooperation in following the guidelines that we're outlining in the next several slides so that we make sure we are compliant.
Ready?
I'm ready. Okay, so here's what we're going to cover. Who's responsible for paperwork? Who will be checking paperwork for compliance? What is the timeline for completing paperwork and submitting the Google form after a meeting? What is the timeline for corrections? What if the parent isn't responding to requests to sign paperwork? And who can I ask for help? So the first thing is going to be who is responsible for paperwork. So the case manager is responsible for completing the IEP, any behavior plan and or transition information. They're also responsible for obtaining the signatures through DocHub, bundling the signature documents, including evaluation documents, if it is an initial or a reeval, and completing and submitting the Google form, which informs the TBLSCC that paperwork is ready for review. The related service provider is responsible for completing the portions of the evaluation report and or IEP related to that particular discipline, whether it be communication or occupational therapy, physical therapy, social work. So the caveat to that is we do have some speech and language only IEPs. In that instance, the SLP is the case manager. So they follow that case manager responsibility list. The school psychologist is responsible for overseeing and completing initials or overseeing the completion of initials and reevaluations. Overseeing completion of the evaluation report. Everybody puts their own part in, but the school psychologist just makes sure that everything is there. And then they will be completing and submitting the Google form, which informs the TBLSEC that the do not qualify paperwork is ready for review.
This is probably not a lot of new information. This is what we've been doing all along, pretty much. We just wanted to make sure it was laid out so there was no questions about who's doing what.
Okay, so does anybody have questions so far? This is directly from our Who Does What document that's in our SPED resources page on the TBLSEC webpage, staff resources. So we just took it directly from there. We changed the verbiage so that it matches BrightSped instead of WebKids.
If you have questions, you can throw them in the chat
Yes.
and we'll address them as soon as we see them.
Okay, next one. Okay, so who's going to be completing your compliance checks? Mary is going to continue to check dates, service lines, signatures, all of that. She's going to be looking to make sure that the services in the anticipated services chart match with the prior written notice. She's going to make sure that service minutes are in the COVID tab for this year. Then Allison is going to check content and compliance with file review questions and state required indicators for the Early Learning Center, for Tonganoxie Elementary, and that'll be pre-K through 5, and for Tonganoxie Middle School.
You guys are so excited, I know.
Yay!
And then I'll be doing the same thing for BS, BIS, GRE, LES, and BLMS.
And then I will be doing the same for Tonganoxie High School and Basehor Linwood High School. Since I'm responsible for lots of state reporting, Jennifer and Allison agreed to take TMS and BLMS. We originally had them on my plate, and then after we were thinking about it, we were thinking that may not be realistic. So we'll see how this goes, and we might tweak as we go along the semester, but that's how we're starting off, and we would notify you of any changes that we have to make. Okay, next one, please. So what is the timeline for completing paperwork and submitting the Google form? This is nothing different. We've been requiring 5 school days since forever, okay?
I think when I updated that compliance timeline document, it was dated August of 2017.
Yes,
So at least since then.
yes. And it was before then when we started requiring within 5 school days, you need to have your paperwork to this office. Now it's different because we're doing everything electronically this time. But that's never been any different. We have not held that timeline hard and fast, but we need your cooperation in trying your best to have this submitted within 5 school days of the IEP meeting. Okay, next one. So what is the timeline for corrections? So within 5 school days of receiving feedback of what needs to be corrected, the correction should be made. And again, we've not been holding hard and fast to that 5 days, but we really need to be. Part of this is there's 3 of us doing this work now. And the other part of this is we get way backed up if we're not having a timely turnaround of paperwork. So not only do we have to check back with who's done their corrections that they're supposed to do, but we're also completing the first compliance check on a bunch of other paperwork. So we have approximately 800 IEPs in our cooperative. So that's a lot of IEPs to check and a lot of checking back to make sure that corrections have been made. So the 5-day turnaround is really important.
And thankfully, we are pretty caught up to December 1.
Yes.
So that's gonna help a lot. So we're kind of moving forward from December 1. So thankfully, there's not much from before that we're still dealing with, which is a huge help to us.
Yes, and we appreciate all your work in getting that December 1 count in for us, the paperwork for that. We wanted to be able to make a fresh start in January. So we were able to move past the December 1 count. And we appreciate your hard work in getting all that completed.
Well, and I know for myself, and I'm sure for you guys, we will do our best to be timely on our end. So when things are turned in within 5 days of the IEP, we're going to hopefully not be waiting months to get you the feedback
Right.
so that you can do the corrections. And that,
Be days.
yeah, and within the 5 days of receiving feedback, obviously that's communication. That's, hopefully if it's an easy fix, you can get that done. But if you're waiting on signatures or things, we're going to expect you to respond to emails, to communicate back with us, to let us know where you're at with those corrections, to make this as seamless as possible. Don't feel like that 5 days and you've got to track down a parent and stalk them to get the signatures and things. We just need you to communicate with us so we know what's going on.
Which really brings us to the next slide, which is when parents aren't responding to requests to sign paperwork, which is our number one delay factor right now that you're experiencing.
So we're going to ask you to try multiple ways to contact parents. Not just an email and they're not responding to your email. You need to pick up the phone and call them. If you text regularly with your parents, some people do, some people don't want parents to have their cell phone numbers, so they don't text with them. But if you do, you can text, email them. You can even make a home visit. Take someone else with you, but you can make a home visit. Document your attempts. So you should have a list of how you've tried to contact the parents about getting your paperwork signed.
There's
your
a parent contact log in Brightspeed, and that's a great place to keep that documentation, because then you can include it in your documents tab. You can put that in the bundle if for some reason we need to have documented all your contacts, like you had to have the meeting without the parent.
Right. Okay, and then the next one is after you've tried these multiple ways, then ask your school team for help. You can ask your social worker, your school psychologist, your building administrator, and then there are gen ed resources you could use to facilitate contact. Maybe that gen ed teacher, there's a gen ed teacher that is in regular contact, or they're having a Zoom with the kids, or whatever that might be, where they can call out and say, hey, can you have your parent, or have your parent contact me or whatever. And then maybe you can work through the gen ed teacher in that way as well.
They're not responsible for doing it for you, but we all know that there's some parents that there's only one person that they're going to talk to. So let's try to use that one person to help us out.
A counselor is another gen ed resource that you could potentially use as well.
Yeah.
But the gist of this is try to use your school team. And then I guess if all else
Go to the next one.
fails, you could go back if you need more help, asking for help. If you can't remember how to do something, access the resources that we posted for you. Talk to your special education team, or talk to Allison, myself, or Donna. But we ask that you do exhaust the other resources first. Ask 3 before me, just because we're taking on these additional responsibilities. We don't mind. We do not mind helping at all. We just want to make sure that you're being as proactive as possible in accessing your resources.
And not just talking about signatures, just in general, if you're not sure how to fill out this paperwork, or where do I find this, or those things. I field a lot of questions about Brightsped. I am very happy to continue doing that, mostly because I have most of the information about Brightsped. But there's also a lot of questions that come about what paperwork should I do, or where do I find this, or so we, again, like Jennifer said, just like the teachers say, 3 before me, ask your shoulder partners. Draw.
Resources.
Yeah, use your school resources, but we are still very glad to help.
Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so common errors before we move on. These are some compliance issues that we're seeing over and over again. So I just collected some of these from past IEPs. So the first thing is Mary will comment quite frequently in her little box on the spreadsheet that we use that the packet doesn't contain all the documents. Okay, we don't want the IEP included in the packet that you're putting there for review, but we do need the rest of these things. Assigned parent rights, electronic communication form, signed Medicaid, notice of meeting, meeting notes, signed prior written notice, final progress report, CLP. And I know not all of you have CLPs, but most do, but some of you don't because your services are the same regardless of the environment. And that kind of relates to our gifted services and some of our related services. And then if applicable, signed consent to evaluate, complete evaluation report with signatures, signed excusal form. So if a teacher can't attend, you've got the signed form there. If there's a behavior intervention plan, and any rubric that might be used for grading. That a lot of times gifted staff will have that. Sometimes our CBR classrooms will have rubrics that are used for grading. So if you're utilizing a rubric and you mention it in your goal, then that rubric should be attached. I will also say if you're using any, which I didn't list here, but if you're using like a point sheet, incentive type of point sheet, include that as well. That's kind of the same as a rubric.
What I've seen some people do when they're creating this packet is when you're getting ready to send it in DocHub, because we assign fields, you can go ahead and build all of these things that are listed here into your packet that you send. And then as you build your fields, you just do the things that require signatures, because like meeting notes don't require signatures. But if you build it all together before you do that, when you have that finalized packet, it's already all put together and you just upload it into your documentation tab. And that just gives you a little bit easier. I know it can make for an unwieldy DocHub, but since parents can just go from field to field to field, or your administrator, whoever, I think that that's probably the easiest way to make sure you've included everything. And I see some comments in the chat, Donna. I don't know if I can get to them from here. If you
Okay, I've got them. So first question, has Brightsped gotten back to us with an easier way to add the final progress report? Or are we still downloading and re-uploading?
We are still downloading and re-uploading. That is the only way. And my recommendation is you do that before you build your bundle so that it's there in that IEP builder to add in. I'm sorry, that's just how it is right now.
Okay, so from Lexi, does the notice of meeting need to be signed every time or
No.
only if they weren't given the 10 days? There seems to be some confusion about this. And I believe that there's some confusion about this because some places, some districts and cooperatives require that you have it signed every time. When we were part of the Leavenworth County Special Education Cooperative, we required that you had it signed every time. We are not requiring that you have it signed unless it's the 10 days. They're signing that they are not going, that you aren't, they agree that they don't get 10 days for their parent rights. They're waiving that. And the reason for that is it gets, it gets confusing, and that's one more thing to get signed, and it can get confusing, and it's not required by law that a parent sign saying they're coming, that they're attending.
So even though we're asking you to put that in that bundle, you don't have to make that a signature field. And if parents ask, you can tell them it's not required, but it's not gonna hurt anything if they do
Yeah.
sign it, so.
Some parents bring it signed, not very many, but some parents do bring it to the meeting and they've signed it. And that was when we were meeting in person. Okay, so let's go to,
Any more questions in the chat before we move on?
yeah, one more. Are we required to give 2 10-day notices if parents don't show? Or can we have meeting after first 10-day notice? Have heard both. Okay, so you give a 10-day notice and you've agreed to this time and date with the parent. It's not just something you pulled out and said, okay, we're gonna have it at this time, and you send the
Mutually
notice. It's a mutually agreeable date and time. So you've done that part, you send the notice, and the parent doesn't show. As long as you have sent that notice 10 days in advance, you may go ahead and have the meeting with your team. You still need the required IEP team members from the school. But you can go ahead and have the meeting, and then make sure that you are contacting the parent to let them know you're happy to go over the paperwork with them, go over the documents with them. And make any necessary, you can amend that IEP to make any changes that the parent wants you to make.
That's
And
not-
actually, it's not even probably not a finalized document yet, if they realize they missed the meeting. Oh my gosh, I missed this meeting.
It's that 2x2 rule.
Yeah.
You've notified them 2 different ways on 2 different times, one of those being the actual notice of meeting.
Right,
So you've sent it 10 days before in your email, you've talked about it, and then 2 days before the meeting, you send another one, hey, don't forget, our meeting's in 2 days. You've covered that.
So then the question is, or it could be, maybe, so you notify them 2 days before the meeting just to remind them, and they say, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about that, I would like to reschedule. So at that point, I think the question may be, do we send another notice of meeting, depending on that date? So we haven't talked about this, but I've had 2 different practices, one of which is to actually revise the current notice of meeting, and get their signature on that notice of meeting that currently went out, that we're revising it. Because it shows on there the tracking of the 10 days notice, so we don't have to restart that clock for the 10-day notice. But I've also heard, which could be Donna's final word right here, that you send a new notice of meeting. So I don't know.
That edit as new button on Brightsped's a great way for you not have to redo the whole thing, just change the date and time, and then you have that record of the first one you sent and the second one if you're revising it.
and we've done both ways. We've
Okay.
had both practices, so we will get back with you with a final decision on that, but we have, in the past, we've had both practices, and as it stands right now, I believe we're requiring another notice. But we'll have to talk with each other about that, and we'll get back with you on that one for sure.
By the time this comes out, it'll be clarified on the
Yes.
slide for you.
So the next question is, so we have to include a notice of meeting and meeting notes in the signature packet. I've only been sending documents needing signatures to parents and then uploading them after being signed. The other items are already in Brightsped.
Correct, they are there. But for Mary's upload, it is best. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, if maybe I can clarify. It's saved a huge time saver for me, not have to go in and out of multiple documents to make sure they're safe. If I have to just click in one upload and see everything instead of going in and out and back and forth, and so I can scroll up and down. So it's a huge time saver for me. But mostly it's that I know everything's in that packet when I archive it, that I've included everything. Because if I have to remember every time I archive something to go and add all these things that are separate, I'm afraid something's going to get missed and we won't have the official record.
Hopefully that answers the question.
Until it's archived, Karen, this might click something here. Until it's archived, you can write over it. So it's not like it's a locked document where it is what it is right then and will always be. Somebody could write over something in that. So that's why it has to be archived by Mary.
Okay.
All right, and then the next question is, with kids coming back next week, do IEP meetings stay via Zoom or can they be held in person? That is a district decision as to whether we can have visitors in the buildings. I do believe right now in Basehor, we are still not able to have visitors in the building, people from outside the building. So I don't believe parents will be coming in for meetings at this point in time.
That's a good question for your building administrator.
Yes, your building administrator would probably be able to tell you what the final word on that is.
Donna, it's the same for Tonganoxie. If you look at the reopening for the spring semester, it says, no outside visitors.
Thank you,
Okay,
David.
thanks.
All right.
Okay, let's go ahead to the next one. So we have an additional 4 common errors. The final progress report is often missing.
I think that's because that extra step of having to
Right.
complete it in the old IEP and then save it as a PDF and then upload it in the new IEP, which I'm sorry, it's a pain. But we appreciate you guys doing that.
Then services on the anticipated services chart not matching the prior written notice. And that's kind of an ongoing thing. We always have those issues and it's just calculation error mostly. So Mary checks those and she'll make a notation that the services don't match. And then that would be something that would come back to you to correct those minutes, which is correct, prior written notice or anticipated services chart. Usually it's the anticipated services chart is correct and the prior written notice is not. That's usually how it goes.
And we're just trying to save you guys some time, because if your service chart is right and your PWN is not, you're gonna have a new PWN, which is a new signature, and it's a whole big deal. So just doing that extra double check for yourself hopefully saves you time in the long run and having to track down more signatures.
Right. And then,
Next,
Go ahead.
the next error that we see, which has really been addressed quite well this year, but still some work can be done, is on question number 5 on the prior written notice, which is essentially boils down to harmful effects of the proposed action. People have gotten better at that. There is also there are harmful effects listed on the IEP. So whatever harmful effect you have listed on the IEP in the considerations, then you should put here as well. But it's not a blanket statement for all, because there are different harmful effects depending on what the proposal is. And as I said, I've really seen people improve their practice on this and really think about what could be a harmful effect associated with what we proposed in box number 1.
So in Brightspeed, you're gonna find that in the placements tab on the 3rd one over, where it has a list of harmful effects that you pick from. It also has an other space where you can type in your own.
It would be ideal if those 2 matched.
and then the last one is addressing the CLP when you do an annual review and you've got a new prior written notice. Don't forget, like, you may have updated the CLP. The CLP may be staying the same, but regardless, you need to also make sure that you've got some mention of the CLP on your prior written notice.
Maybe you didn't change anything. It's exactly the same.
Right.
You just went in and put new dates on there, new IEP date and whatever. You need to at least say that it's gonna continue as written. We just need to know that you've talked to parents about the CLP. and that they are giving consent for that plan.
There was something else that went through my brain that I forgot to put on here and now it's gone.
You'll remember it. Okay,
So if I interrupt somebody, it's
No,
because
that's all right.
I remembered it. Okay.
okay, moving on.
We're talking CLPs.
All right.
Okay, so we've got a couple questions, so let's address these questions before we move on. First was a comment from Christy. My parents are still requesting online meetings, and I think we'll find that to be true. It's convenient for parents, and the feedback that I've gotten from some building administrators as well as some teachers is that they have feedback from parents that they like the online IEP meetings because they don't have to necessarily take a half day off work to come to an hour and a half meeting.
Or bring their 3 little younger
Yes.
kids to the school building with them, or,
Right.
yeah. I think my view is that we're getting better participation with the online format.
Oh, that was the other thing that I was thinking. COVID minutes.
Oh, yes, the COVID
I
tab.
did not put that on here, and I will add that before we send the slides presentation out. But make sure that you are addressing COVID minutes. Whatever you're doing at the time is what the COVID minutes are. So, because we were uploading those for December 1, now it is, we still need to have
Yeah.
the minutes.
Even if they are identical
Right.
to what your other minutes are. And now for this in Vaser, where they have this every
Every other.
Wednesday, we were saying not to change your CLP for that.
No.
We are not.
So I would say that same thing goes for your COVID minutes.
Correct.
You don't need to adjust COVID minutes for that.
Correct.
Can I just say that even if you don't have a CLP, there needs to be COVID minutes, because when I upload, it's one or the other. So if I upload everybody in COVID minutes and you didn't have anything in the COVID minutes, it says they have no minutes. So even if it's the exact same, you don't have a CLP, I need those minutes in the COVID tab.
And we're sorry you have to type them in twice. I wish there was an easier way to do it.
Okay, the next one from Julie Coffey. Is there any way to copy the service lines from one CLP to the next?
I'm so sorry right now. And that's something that is on my list to talk to Brightsped about, getting like a duplicate service line button. We unfortunately don't have one right now. It would be ideal if we did. So again, I apologize, and Brightsped, you will have to type in those minutes again, the service lines.
Okay, and then Karen made a comment that the same is true with parent-teacher conferences. There was better participation with Zoom. And I heard that as well. I heard a lot of good comments about how well attended those Zoom conferences were. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. All right, so I know it's,
Does that mean we're done talking about
we're done
compliance?
talking about compliance.
Yay!
All right, the next thing is we're getting some questions. First of all, coordinating and planning ESY has to start early. So I know this seems really early to be thinking about extended school year services, but we need to have our mindset that, okay, we're having these spring IEPs. If we didn't address it in the last IEP or during the fall semester, we need to be addressing it now. So I am going to have Lori run a report of who right now has ESY, and we'll get to that here in a minute. But I want to make a distinction between what ESY is, what recovery services are, and what compensatory services are, okay? So ESY students must qualify. So we're talking about students who are multiple grade levels behind. Some of them have adaptive needs, but they have to qualify through one of those 4 bullets there: regression and recoupment, emerging skills, breakthrough opportunities, nature or severity of disability, and interfering behaviors.
And
So
there's that page you have to fill out,
Right,
that
which-
document.
I'm gonna have Allison show here in just a second. But with regression and recoupment, we're talking over some sort of break, like Christmas break, like summer break. A student regresses from data that you collected from one point in time to after the break. A student has regressed. And they also took 9 weeks or more to recoup that skill. So that's regression and recoupment. And I think that one is often misunderstood. Emerging skills or breakthrough opportunities, that is often speech and language. That's often early childhood. Sometimes it is a student who has some significant social emotional issues, and the compliance is gaining steam. And so we want to keep that going during the summer as much as we can, so that they can start the year on a good note. Nature and severity of disability, this would be your students who are like in our CBR programs. Also students who have sensory disorders, such as visually impaired, hearing impaired, those types of things. And then we have interfering behaviors. And very often that applies to your early childhood students or students who are in our STAR program. There really should be very few students. This is the most restrictive setting for a kid in the summer. So we should really have a limitation on how many kids we are qualifying for this. Last year, some elementaries had long lists of kids who qualified for ESY. And I just did not have the time to sort through all of those justification sheets and request the data. So we just went ahead and left them on. But
Donna.
this year we will be taking a look at those.
Doesn't it, and I feel like this is something we come back to over and over again in special education, but it's that difference between benefits from and requires. And I feel like ESY is one of those things where we feel like, oh, this student would really benefit from it. And they probably would, but that's different than requires. And that is so hard, because I know my teacher heart wants every one of my kids to get every single thing that I can possibly give them. But we have to keep that in our brain, that it's for students who require it and qualify.
So, okay, so Sarah says, I've never had a student on my caseload that had ESY, and I do this year. I will need someone to talk me through this. IEP is in April. Absolutely, we will help you with that. Colleen says, so if I have a 6th grader who came to middle school with it checked, but didn't drop at all during winter break, I don't have to keep qualifying them, right?
Correct.
And that is correct. If the data does not support the student qualifying in one of those areas, then you need to amend the IEP to show that he no longer qualifies for ESY.
Or if you haven't had the meeting yet,
Right.
when you have the meeting, you'll take it off.
So the next thing that we wanted to talk about is recovery. Okay, and this is a new term, and this is only used during a time like we're in right now, where there are interruptions to a child's education because of something happening in their community. In this case, it's COVID-19. It could be like kids who are living in areas where there are hurricanes, and for months at a time, there's not a school location available to them. So it's not just for COVID-19, but right now it is just for COVID-19 for us. So a student you find as an IEP team, the student's not making progress towards their goals due to a loss of instructional time during the pandemic, or because of the modality that's having to be used for that student to have their education. So like online learning, for example, and student is not making progress because of that online learning. So what recovery is providing additional support to help the student make progress towards those goals and in the general education curriculum. The IEP team's going to look at comparative data to determine that need. And those services are provided during the school day. So I'm going to give you an example of what we're talking about. In Baser Linwood, there are teachers who are bringing students in during remote only learning this week, okay? Because those are students who are having a hard time with remote learning. There are other students that we determined on their CLP that they would not be able to access the remote learning and make progress. Both of those situations are examples of recovery services that we're providing. In Tonganoxie, I know at the high school, I can't remember was it Gold Day that you called it? I don't remember what you called it. Was it Gold Day? Okay, so those Gold Days, you had kids come in who were falling behind because of the remote situation that you had going. So everybody, the 3 weeks before Christmas, we were all on remote at that time, both districts. And some kids fared well, some kids didn't fare very well. So recovery is providing them extra support during the school day to address that issue. Now, you may have kids whose parent chose remote. It's not going well for them, but you can't convince the parent for the student to be coming in. In that case, we could provide recovery services in the summer. That needs to be an IEP team decision. You need to have data to support that. And we would have them side by side. Those services would be during the ESY session, but we're not qualifying them under ESY. And we need to make that clear to parents. They don't qualify for ESY, but we're going to provide them with some recovery services during this time. Does that make sense to everybody? Do you see the difference there? If you have questions about that, please reach out to us. We want you to have the verbiage to be able to discuss these things with parents. And then compensatory is even a different animal altogether. And a parent might throw out, because they've read SPED law, that their child needs compensatory services due to remote instruction or whatever, not making progress during this time. That's not compensatory services, that's recovery. Compensatory services is that the district failed to provide FAPE to the student, okay? So we didn't provide services to them. We didn't provide them a way to access and make progress in the general ed curriculum. So that is when either the district preemptively says, okay, this teacher was out, we had a sub in there, and we know that the instruction, that specialized instruction was not happening during that time. We found that out, so we're going to provide compensatory services. Or it's when a parent files a complaint with the state that their child is not receiving FAPE because they didn't receive their services. And the state then, as a remedy to that complaint, will tell the district, you need to provide compensatory services for this student. Those services can't happen during the school day because we're not going to pull them out of the services they already have, and we're not going to pull them out of their gen ed curriculum to provide those services. So those services have to be provided after school, before school, during the summer, during a school break. Luckily, there's very few of students who would have that situation. A parent might file a complaint, but I think with the CLPs that we have, the documentation that we have, we would be able to support that we were providing the student with FAPE. We may have a student who's not logging on, but we're documenting that. We're contacting the parent and saying, where's your child? Your child is not receiving their services because they're not logging in. Even if we're not able to talk to that parent person to person, we are documenting that we called and left a message. We are documenting that we emailed. If we regular texters with that parent, that we've texted the parent. Save those emails, save how you have communicated, and make sure you have that documentation. And then that can be supported, that you have indeed made services available to that student, but the parent has not made the student available to you so that they can receive their services.
And Donna,
You want to problem solve also. Is there a problem with the time? Is there a problem with connectivity? And try to work through those
what's
with
the
parents.
barriers?
What are the barriers to them not accessing?
And I think you guys probably have a list of kids in your mind right now that you're thinking of, okay, what am I gonna do about this? That would be really awesome for you guys to put those students on the agenda for your team meeting this month so that we can address that specifically with you and your team during that time, because we'll be able to give you much more direct information in your particular circumstances. This is kind of broad, general information.
Okay, so Ally has a question. If the student is not participating in current online school, how will we try to convince parents to consider summer recovery? I think that you provide, that would be a recovery situation, and I would just try to talk with the parent about, by showing them the data. You know, this is where we would expect your child to be by this time, but they're not accessing their services, they're not participating. So we need for them to come in the summer so that they're not starting the next school year with a delay even further. So I would use the data to support that discussion. You may or may not be able to convince the parent. That is a parent right to refuse those services.
It might be a situation where you need to document that with the
Yes.
PWN, where the team has recommended this, and the parents can then refuse that, and then you can have a different PWN with what the parent will agree to. But
And it can be a separate,
Yeah.
we're gonna talk about that because I see it as being a separate PWN altogether. It may not be during the IEP team meeting or the IEP meeting. Maybe it is in April, a conversation you're having in April. And you're saying, hey, we can provide these recovery services to you and this is what it would look like. Are you on board with this? And if they say no, then that is either going to be a prior written notice or it's going to be a ready, willing, and able letter. I want to check that out with the state first to see what they would recommend since we're talking about recovery services.
Okay.
So we'll let you know on that because we're really not at that point yet.
we'll be bringing it to your team
Yeah.
meetings.
Our CLPs have already addressed recovery with what you're doing, bringing kids in during remote. So we already have that documentation.
You guys are awesome.
Yes.
All of the work you've done for those CLPs is making this a lot easier right now. So thank you again for that hard work.
Absolutely. Anne Marie says, I have a high school student who has a parent wanting him to participate in summer school due to failing 2 of his classes. Summer school that a parent pays for is different than ESY, correct? Yes, that is correct. And I don't know where both districts will be on summer school this year. In the past, Tonganoxie has had kind of a recovery credit recovery type of summer school. And then the middle school has also, like if they were failing 2 or more classes, they had to come take some content in the summer. I don't know if that will happen. I don't know that we're there yet in our thinking about how that's going to be provided. Baser has just done, they haven't had actual summer school. It's been more the, here's some online resources, here's some paper pencil resources for parents. You can pick this up if you want your child to have this over the summer. I don't know if there was credit recovery. Maybe somebody can tell me. Was there credit recovery at Baser-Linwood High School during the summer, last summer? Anybody know? Okay, well, we'll have to check on that. I don't know if there was.
Any credit recovery is done through virtual school.
Okay, thank you, Robin.
Uh-huh.
All right, so So there wasn't any in Basel Limit. Now, that could be different this summer. I just don't know how that will look. The districts might be offering something different just because of what all kids have been through. So I would anticipate more information about that this spring.
Yeah, good question for your building administrator too.
Yeah.
Those would probably be the first people to know.
Okay, so Ally says, question might not be recovery. We are doing everything we can to get the student to work, but they're not making progress because of the environment and participation levels. Yeah. And I would call that could be recovery still. You could still recommend recovery during the summer for that.
Ready?
Okay, let's go on to the next. ESY as a topic on its own. So if you have a student on your caseload who currently has ESY on their IEP, you will be receiving an email in the next couple of weeks, and it will probably come from Lori Shattuck. And what you need to do is you need to make sure that the student still qualifies using the ESY justification form in Brightsped. And I'm going to have Allison pull that up.
Okay, give me a second. I'm gonna stop this share and pull those items up real quick.
And I see that I have a typo there. I didn't end my parentheses at the end of my sentence. My apologies.
All right, let me get to Brightsped. You guys can keep talking while I find this document here.
Okay. Sorry.
That's all right. I'm not screen sharing right now so that you guys don't have to watch me fumble around on my computer.
And that means I can't see what I'm supposed to say. So that's why there's this dead silence right now.
Sorry. Okay.
Somebody might be able to do a song and dance for us. I don't know.
Not me. Okay, so let me come back to my screen share here. Okay, so we are talking about, let me make this bigger. The ESY justification. So in your documents, you'll notice there is like there's a little ESY section here. So the justification form.
Oh, and first, under special considerations, if you're discussing ESY, you need to click ESY in that
Let me show you where
special
that's at.
considerations.
So here in special considerations, if this doesn't say yes, then it won't prompt you to fill out the ESY that's down here.
But if it does, then you can see ESY justification form,
It
and that'll
prompts you.
actually pop up for you.
Yep, it prompts you to go ahead and fill out this form. And
Hey,
people who-
Allison, it prompts you to do it even if you select that you're gonna address it at a later date.
Okay, well, that's good to know, because if you've selected that you're gonna do it at a later date, that later date is coming up. So
Right.
thanks for bringing us back to that. But this
Right,
is the
yeah.
justification form. As you can see, it's just got the 4 areas and it's gonna ask you to put in your data. It's a pretty simple form. And again, you do not have to fill out every single section of this because most students are not gonna qualify for every single area of justification. So you just fill out the needed information.
Okay.
All
Let's go
right,
to the next,
let's go back to
your slide. Okay, so
let me get back in here. There we go.
okay, thanks. So you be looking for an email and you are going to take a look to see, does the student still qualify? So take a look at that justification form and see if the data that you have now still supports the reason, the rationale that was given for your student to participate in ESY. They may no longer qualify, and it's a very restrictive setting. Most kids don't really like having to come to ESY. We have a lot of absences in ESY. Some kids love it. Some kids are just used to it, and they like coming because it's part of their routine. But your typical kid is not real keen on coming to ESY during the summer. So make sure that you are using your data to make these decisions, the data that you have. And then the deadline for amending IEPs to add or remove ESY from the IEP is March 1st, unless the student moves in with ESY on their IEP or they are an early childhood student, because we qualify early childhood students all the time. An early childhood student in August is going to look way different than they do in February. So, and from year to year. So there may be some later decisions on ESY for our early childhood kids. And that'll be a discussion that I can have with the early childhood team at a later date.
So Donna, if I have selected that the team is gonna decide at a later date for an IEP that happened in like October, totally appropriate. But I have to have that meeting and I have to have an amendment to either add it or remove it, correct?
Correct.
And that's gonna, and make the changes in Brightsped along with that amendment.
And it can be an amendment without a meeting.
A good time to do this, guys, is parent-teacher conferences
Yes.
coming up in a month. You've got the parent already there, you can have, well, virtually there, but you can have that discussion, get the permission, and just take care of it. We kind of bumped it back to March 1st to allow for Tonganoxie's parent-teacher conferences, which are later in the month, but that gives you guys plenty of time to have that paperwork.
Okay, so the paperwork that you have, you need the justification form and the ESY plan. You need to complete the ESY transportation card. That is a different transportation card than the normal transportation card. It will say ESY transportation card.
And even students who get ESY and have transportation, but they don't normally have transportation, still need a transportation card, but don't change their IEP's transportation.
Right.
Just the card for ESY.
Because it's situational that they need transportation, because likely it could be it's not at their neighborhood building. So they would be unable to walk there, or it may be
It's from a daycare situation.
right from a daycare, something like that. So they qualify because of the circumstance, not because they would normally qualify for transportation.
All right.
Okay, and then the last point there, adding or removing ESY requires an amendment, but you can call the parent and say, are you okay doing this amendment over the phone, or would you prefer a meeting? We always need to offer a meeting to the parent. And they usually, with something like this, if they're in agreement with what you're doing, they're not going to request a meeting. So with the ESY plan, you need to decide on goals to be worked on. And I will tell you, I can't tell you how many times people have picked every single goal that the kid has. That's not realistic for ESY. So you need to make sure that you're choosing goals that are appropriate to be addressed during ESY. Somebody's not going to have time to work on 12 goals. And in the past, that's been an issue where all 12 goals, kid has 12 goals, all 12 goals are supposed to be worked on during ESY.
Yeah.
12 goals is a lot anyway, but I know with some of our really involved kids, they can get a lot of goals, but pick what's most important for them to be working on so that they don't lose that skill during the summer.
Hey, Donna, can I just interject, since I've done ESY for many years? I agree with you completely. I would say 3 at the max, 4 goals is
Or a
all
team.
we ever have time to get to.
Yeah, 3, I would say 3. And
Yeah.
then there also may be goals for speech, for OT, for PT. That's fine, but again, you might have 4 communication goals and not all of them can be addressed during ESY. So
Be mindful.
be mindful of that. And also know that we will be sending out interest inquiries into participating in providing services for ESY. That'll come probably around the same time, March 1st time, because I need to get an idea of who wants to work and an idea of if I have to go outside of our cooperative to find staff. I always inquire with teaching staff first and then with paras. And that's usually later in the spring that I send anything out to paras. So if they're asking you, let them know the paras will be getting something about ESY, most likely after spring break.
And we don't know yet if it'll be virtual or not, right?
We don't know, Mary. Right now, we are planning on in-person services because most of our students who require ESY are students who are not able to learn and make progress on the remote platform.
And that's been in their contingency learning plan.
Right, and they've
All
been
along.
coming in anyway. So we would continue that practice in the summer. There may be students who they're remote learners now and their parents really don't want them coming in, even with a small group of kids that would be coming in for ESY. And we'll just have to work with that and determine if we need to designate a teacher as a remote teacher or how we would address that. So it's too early to tell right now. So
All right.
right now, I'm just planning on in-person services for everybody.
I'm gonna keep us on
I know.
track time-wise.
I know. Dee Dee had a question. Will we be giving parents the choice for on-site or remote services for ESY? Just what I said. I think we're going to plan on in-person services at this point in time. If there's a parent who we know the kid really needs services for ESY and the parent is adamant they're not coming in, we will figure out a way to provide them remote services.
Ready?
Yeah.
Oh, this is my favorite one.
I like this one.
Brightsped, short and sweet. No major changes right now, despite there are some changes we still want, like with goals and progress reports. No changes to report right now. We really appreciate it when you report issues. We can get those straight to Brightsped as soon as we can and get those fixed. Thank you. I know that there was a whole big thing right before break with everybody having to change their password and new password requirements. If you're still having issues with your password, shoot me an email, shoot Mary an email. We can help you get that resolved. But we're just excited that there's no big updates to warn you of.
Right.
Right.
All right, excellent. All right, I always get these questions. Lots of times throughout the year, but very often between now and the end of the year. And I just thought we'd get this information out to everyone now because we have so many new people. So for materials, equipment, and supplies, what does the co-op do for those things? So the TBL-SEC is responsible for providing whatever is necessary for the student to access the curriculum and make progress towards goals. Okay, so these would be things like assessment materials used to determine eligibility and progress monitoring, materials and subscriptions to provide specialized instruction. So that would be for reading, math, written language, social, emotional, transition, related services. However, those materials need to be evidence-based. I can't buy anything for you off Teacher Pay Teacher. Every once in a while, I have had somebody turn in a request for reimbursement for something that they've gotten off of Teachers Pay Teacher because it really was an evidence-based practice that this person had created materials for. And the person who was requesting it was able to justify that to me. So that's an exception to the rule there. But materials must be evidence-based or based on a practice that is evidence-based. And then assistive technology. So for that, the student must have an AT plan in their IEP. Or we're trialing something for them. They've gone through the AT referral process and we are doing an assessment. And part of that assessment is we are giving them a device or we are doing some sort of assistive technology with them that we're seeing whether or not this will work for
That
them.
usually all comes through Jackie.
Jackie generally heads all of that up. Then equipment such as standers, walkers, lifts, changing tables, that kind of thing. Jackie is really good at trying to find those to rent or borrow first. If we're unable to rent or borrow, if we don't already have them and we're unable to rent or borrow, then we do purchase them. Those are normally really big ticket items. So it's really, I know sometimes a kid moves in and we don't know that kid's coming and we don't know that we're gonna have to buy this equipment for this kid. Those things happen, and that's why we have a budget, okay? So that we can plan for unknowns and have money set aside for those kinds of things. But if you know of a student who needs some sort of equipment like that, it for next year, it's better to let me know by the end of the school year, sooner rather than later, so that I can plan for that equipment in the budget and know that there's money there for it. And then we provide supplies such as wipes and gloves and those kinds of things. So what are we not responsible for? We're not responsible for providing sped teachers with what general education teachers are provided by the district or the building, okay? So if it's a new classroom, like we purchased early childhood furniture and equipment and all of that for the new early childhood classroom at Tonganoxie Elementary. And the reason we did that was because it was a new program. And so we worked together. Tonganoxie purchased some things, but the co-op purchased most of those things. When we started Pathways, Basehor Linwood picked up some of the tab for the rehab that went into that building. We bought the equipment and things like the stove and the refrigerator and those kinds of things, because that was specifically for that program. So that's what's different. So like a file cabinet, your district should be providing you with a file cabinet, student desks and tables, general office supplies, those kinds of things. Now, if there's a problem and you're not able to get what you need because it's your building administrator's telling you that it's not in the budget or whatever, please come to me and let me know. And I will have a conversation with that administrator, and then we will determine how we're going to provide that for you. And it could be we have to come together with some money to provide that to you. The other thing that's not on here that I do spend quite a bit of money on every year, and that is professional development. This year is a little different, but we have paid for people to go to certain things, and usually we try to do that through TASN because it's less cost to us to go through TASN, or sometimes staff will go to, like if you're a CBR teacher or a structured learning teacher, there are organizations that provide professional development to school districts, and it's pretty low cost or it's even free. So we will send you to those things. Every once in a while, there'll be a conference that we'll send a group of people to. So that usually happens. It hasn't happened this year. I'm hoping second semester I can find some virtual things for teachers to participate in. So that's not on here, but that is something that we do provide for our staff.
Right, great.
Any questions on that?
I think there's a couple of questions up in the chat, but I'm
Okay.
not sure.
So let's see, back to the minutes were changing after entry. Did we get this fixed? I do believe that was.
Yes, that was a scrolling on you in Google Chrome on your mouse, the little scroll wheel was changing them, and they have fixed that bug.
Okay, and then Colleen, if we have a program that we want to use that is not in the building, can we request them? Yes, you may put in a request for a specific program, but again, it has to be evidence-based for the group of students that you're working with, and I have to have enough money for it. Sometimes people request things that are over $10,000, and when you understand that my budget is limited, I cannot provide that for one teacher.
Well, and I know we're having a lot of discussions right now because we know you guys need more instructional resources. And so hang on, because we are going to come back to that.
Yes, we'll come back to that. All right, bye Robin, she had an appointment. Oh,
Can you go back?
no, you're fine. Are CEUs covered for certified staff? No, they're not covered for certified staff, because those are things that you pay for to keep your license. There are some opportunities during that we allow you to take professional leave to go do, and there's a lot of free things through TASN. We also have a subscription to Infinitec, and if you have not set yours up yet, please let us know. We will figure out how to get you set up. It's not hard. There are several things on Infinitec that you can earn CEUs. So although we don't pay for those, we do allow the professional leave time. And there's a form to be filled out to do that. And then, and I can get with you on that. And then we would approve the professional leave, but you would pay for the CEUs. Okay,
Any other questions?
any other questions right now before we move on? We don't have a lot left, I promise.
Okay, so this is our resources page that has been compiled because these are all the things that have been referenced during this presentation today. You guys are all familiar with our TVL-SEC resource webpage. That's just a link to it there, which we're going to share this in a minute. And this is a list of the things, again, that we reviewed for your reference. And then the last thing that we have today is that we are looking at specialized materials to provide specialized instruction for mathematics. And so we are going to be looking in both districts and if you're interested in participating, let me know because we're going to be I'm going to start sending something out by the end of January so that you should get that so we can finish this up this semester to make recommendations to our superintendents by the end of the year and we can get it purchased,
And hopefully some training,
which would go along with that.
exciting times. And that's the end.
I think there's one more. Is there? Maybe not.
Nope, that's the
Okay.
end.
That's it. All right, if you have additional questions, please don't hesitate to email us, send them our way. And we appreciate everybody joining